Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Self Knowledge. Today we have the topic number 20 of the Self Knowledge course. Let me check the audio here. Okay, let me see here. Okay. And well, today we're going to see topic number 20 of the Self Knowledge course. And today we are going to talk about the psychological country. So in today's lecture, we are going to be talking about that part of our inner world where we go every time one of our many psychological defects manifest in us and take us out of the here and now, of the present moment. We know that our consciousness only manifests when we manage to be living the here and now, the present moment. And whenever we are out of this self-remembering state of living the here and now, letting our consciousness manifest, we are actually dreaming in the projections and scenarios of our psychological country that is part of our mind and of our emotion. Also, this psychological country is the same place where we go every time that our physical body falls asleep, and we go there to dream, to that place, to that psychological country where we have all of your dreams. You know, when you find yourself dreaming and you are in the middle of a, I don't know, fight. There you are in a part of your psychological country, for example. And also is where we go every time that our physical body dies. So that is our psychological country. And this topic is actually very interesting because by studying and understanding this topic, we will get out of that mistake that we make of believing ourselves to be good people. And today we are going to see why it's important that we get out of that error of believing ourselves to be good. And we are going to learn also today how to begin to change our center of gravity that currently only revolves about the things of the personality, to move it towards the things of the consciousness, so that we can start that wonderful path to the source, to the self-realization of our being. And well, as we see today, we are having a very, very interesting lecture. And let's start this lecture. Let me change here to put the slides. Allow me just a moment. Okay, now. That unquestionably, as there exists an external country where we live, in our interior there exists a psychological country. Well, allow me one more minute, sorry. There you go. And well, in our interior there exists also a country that is our psychological country. But most of us are unaware of this fact because we don't ignore the place where we live. We all know that. However, most of the times we don't know the psychological place where we are located. We know at a given moment the place where we are physically located, but without even remotely suspect the place of the psychology or the place of the psychological country in which we have gotten into. We have this physical body, you know, that allows us to have a constant presence in this third dimension, but lacking of an astral body, a solar astral body that allow us to handle our emotions, and lacking of a mental body that allow us to handle those thoughts. And instead of that, we have only like a principle of these bodies, and for that reason we are constantly being psychologically controlled for all the multiplicity of emotions and thoughts that make up our ego. And our emotion and thoughts keep constantly, wandering from one place of our psychological country to another. We at some point are in a very happy place of our psychology, and it's just that something happens, or sometimes without anything relevant happening, we move to another part of our psychological country where it's raining, where everything looks like dark, where we feel like, I don't know, in depression, etc. And so those are our psychological defects, are internally taking us from one place to another, and they are making us unable to stay focused, to live the present moment, to be alert, to be awake. And we can see that just as in the external country in which we live, there are very beautiful and very pleasant places. So in our psychological country, there are very beautiful places like those to which we psychologically go when we are in love and we have such pleasant emotions and we imagine such beautiful scenes. All those scenes that we imagine are actually taking place in our psychological country. But just as in a pleasant moment we can feel, think, and imagine beautiful and pleasant things, in unpleasant moments, moments of fear, of anguish, of being worried about something, or when feeling anger, we psychologically move to very ugly and sometimes very wicked places. Because just as in the external country in which we live, there are ugly places where perverse and horrible things happen, so there are places in our psychological country. And it is interesting to observe how everyone has their own particular psychological country. As you can see, the two people can listen, for example, to the story of a tragic and a bloody news. But each one of them is going to set that scene in their minds in a totally different way from the other, according, obviously, to what each one carries in their own psychology. Each one we recreate the story in their mind with their own characters, with their own places, and we'll even add or subtract details from that story according to what exists in his own psychological country. And the reason these places exist internally is the same reason why these places exist internally. That is important to understand. And it is because of the kind of inhabitants who live in those places. Because just as in the outside world, there are all kinds of people. You see, there are cultured people, honorable people, nice people. There are also dishonest people, cruel people, wicked and unpleasant people. The same within us. Remember that phrase of Hermes Trismegistus that says, "As within, so without. As above, so below. As within, so without." Is the same. Within us there exists a multiplicity of people who manifest themselves in our interior from moment to moment, making us think in this or in that way, making us feel in this or in that way, making us do this or do that, according to the circumstances that we are living or according to the mood that we have at that moment. And those people that live inside of us are our different ways of being. All the psychological defects or the psychological eyes that make up our ego. We can see that at one point we behaved in a pleasant and a friendly way, but if something or somebody makes us angry, we can behave rudely. So if, for example, someone looks attractive to us, immediately we change because we start like behaving lustfully. Or if greed is moving us, we change, we are another person, we think in a different way, we feel in a different way, we talk in a different way, we act in a different way. Or if, for example, the people manifesting in us is fear, we act, think, move, speak in a very different way. Since everything will depend on the companions that we have, the same as externally, the same internally. There is an old saying that goes, tell me who you walk with, and I will tell you who you are. And the companions that we have always, or let's say that we have always stayed, let me see how I can explain this. The places where we go are usually be defined by the people who we tend to go around with. Like the companions that we have always tend to define the places that we frequent. For example, if we have drunk friends, we will always have the tendency to go to bars, for example. Or if we usually spend time with friends addicted to drugs, then we will be constantly frequenting places where drugs are consumed and where they are sold. And if we are related, for example, to people who frequent brothels, we will end up going to brothels. If we usually hang out with business people, then we will end up in business meetings, in offices. If we go along with musicians, we will end up going to concerts, to rehearsals, etc. And likewise, the same happens within ourselves, within our psychological country. We have our companions that are our different psychological selves, and they take us to different places in our psychological country, and that according to their characteristics. And we can see that externally we can project one thing, while internally we are something totally different, because these internal psychological defects sometimes they act in ourselves, and they make us move in this psychological country to places that have nothing to do with the places in which we move in this third dimension. Most of the time it's like that. Externally, we can be located in a certain place and pretend to be certain kind of people, while in our psychological country we can be in a completely opposite place, thinking, feeling, and desiring totally different things. We could illustrate this with certain examples. For example, we can imagine a virtuous lady, magnificent wife, exemplary behavior, faithful, decent, honorable, physically located in a beautiful mansion. You see that woman and you see, wow, perfect, But she might find herself within a den of prostitution within her psychological country because of her lewdness, or because all day she is being carried away by her lustful defects, like for example, when she sees the gardener or the delivery man or the neighbor or the actor in the movie or in the series, and she imagines all kinds of lustful scenes. Psychologically, she is involved in motels and places of prostitution, even though she is physically there, being showing something very different. But we can imagine another example. Let's say a guy known for being of an impeccable honesty, so honorable, good citizen. And we see him, for example, located physically in a business meeting, neatly dressed in a suit, but within his psychological country, he can easily find himself located inside a den of thieves due to those greedy selves that are stocked there in his consciousness. And although he seeks to appear very honorable, internally he might be easily planning how to take advantage of that business, how to make the other do badly for him to be promoted, what strategy to use so that the competition breaks, for example, to keep the monopoly of the market of his business, for example. And why not? He could even find himself planning how to steal some money of that from that business or etc. That is something that easily happens, and if we reflect on this, we can see that what we see on the outside is almost never compatible with the internal reality. Faces we see, hearts we don't know. We could see a monk in a monastery, but internally he can easily be located in totally different place, precisely of his psychological defects that are deep in his psyche. And we could even, that could sound incredible for some. Crime also hides between the incense of prayer. Under those temples, under those sanctuaries, crime is actually clothed in the robe of holiness and sublime work. And well, actually, this is not something so like incredible, because we can easily take any of the thousands of examples on situations that have happened with those so-called, men of God in the various churches and religious cults. Because as long as we don't discover and we don't get to accept all that evilness that resides within us, and we begin to work on our psychology, on the psychological death, and instead we continue to see God and Satan as something external to us, we will continue to believe ourselves to be very good people, and we are going to continue believing ourselves to be victims of the circumstances without ever achieving a real and definitive change within ourselves. That external thing that we project is just like a facade, it's a mask. What we carry internally in our psychology is what truly defines us. And if we really want to awaken consciousness, we must first realize who is living in our psychology and in what places internally those people that live inside of us keep us stuck every time. So we must observe the dark psychological places where anger, when manifesting in us, take us. You can see that someone offends us, and on the outside we can easily put up with it. We can pretend that it didn't hurt due to personality, due to a religious belief, or even due to a concept that I have. You know that you have to vibrate in love. So if someone offends me, I'm going to get along with that. I'm going to be okay. But the reality is what is happening internally, not what I am showing. I can show whatever, but the reality is what I am living internally. How internally I am hating that person. I am criticizing that person. And why not? Inside of me, I can even be murdering that person. That is my reality. But we believe that the internal is like the unreal. And we don't tend to give much importance to that psychological places in which we find ourselves in those moments. And that is why we can find cases of very good people who from one moment to another turn out to have killed someone, or turned out to have raped someone, or the guy that raped his daughter, or suddenly discovered that good guy was cheating or was robbing and so on. And actually it's because of that, because we can think of ourselves to be what we are trying to show externally, and we can make everyone to believe that this personality, that mask that I'm showing, is what I am, but this is not. The reality is what I am thinking at every moment, what I am feeling at every moment, what I am planning, what I fear, what I project. That is the reality. You know that the personality is just that. It's just a mask. Every time that we come to a new existence, we create a whole new, different personality, and we had, for example, in the past existence, a different number, a name, a different surname, for example, or maybe the same. But we had a different face, we had a different body, we have a different way of speaking, a different, totally different every time we create a new one. And this is just that, just a mask, just a thing that we show to others. But the reality is what we are living inside of us. The reality are all those psychological defects that have trapped our consciousness, which is the real thing. So we need to start working on ourselves. We must start eliminating our psychological defects to start disintegrating all those concepts, all those wrong ways of being, of feel, wrong ways of react, of speaking, of talking, that live inside in ourselves, so we can rescue our consciousness and we can actually become conscious people. Being conscious is totally different from being good. We must understand that believing ourselves to be good is going to make us conscious. Not at all. Trying to be good will not make us conscious. It will only continue to feed that false concept that we have created of ourselves, and it is precisely the one that doesn't allow us to awaken our consciousness. Because this concept that we have of ourselves always convince us that we are fine, that we are well, that we don't need to change. Because we are model citizens. We are exemplary people. Because we haven't killed anyone, we don't steal, we don't smoke, and in case we smoke, we don't do meth, at least, yeah? We don't drink, or just a little. We don't harm anyone, because we are very good people. And that self-knowledge thing and that eliminating psychological defects is perfect for others. It's perfect for, that guy, or for my partner, perfect. To the neighbor, perfect. But not for me, because I am so good. But we need to realize that all people are only mirrors where our inner evilness is reflected. And that defect that I'm pointing out and that I'm judging in others exists in me. Because the same fact that I am criticizing that I am hating that, makes me understand that I don't have any understanding about that I don't have love in my interior, because I am reacting that way. So if I send my attention to my interior, looking for that psychological defect inside of me, I'm going to find it. If I don't have a defect, it is because I have a virtue. But we must learn to differentiate a virtue from a repressed defect. Because most of the times we think that we don't have a defect, and we do have it. But the thing is that we have it repressed. And only when we get to observe ourselves, judge ourselves ruthlessly, and understand that we are not that good or virtuous people that we think. And when we open ourselves to look for our reality, to get to find, to discover that internal darkness that we all have within ourselves, that most of the times is hidden in this pleasant face, but in my mind I am killing everyone. That is my reality. And that I need to observe, that I need to work, that I need to eliminate. I need to know that all those psychological defects are constantly manifesting, and if I know that, I just need to self-observe and discover them. So I need to observe my mind to see who is thinking. There I can discover when the greed is thinking, when the envy is thinking, when the murder is thinking, when the depressed one is thinking, where the anxiety is thinking, etc. I observe my emotion and the same. I can discover from moment to moment who is moving in my emotion, because those are the psychological defects that are feeding on my emotional energy, that makes me all the time be living in dark places of my psychological country. I must observe what is moving on in my sex, what is moving in my words, in my actions. And if we decide to start doing this work and judging ourselves ruthlessly, and stop looking for external culprits to our reactions and to our ways of thinking, because that is what we commonly do. And we decide to do this work and to eliminate those thousands of wrong ways of being that live within us, then we can really start an inner revolution that will lead us to a radical change, and that will bring light to that darkness that exists in our psychological country. That is why this quote is so true, that there is much virtue in the wicked and much weakness in the virtuous. Because the one who is like a bad person and accept this fact, accept his evilness, at least he is sincere with him. And if he already like reached that point in which he understand that he just like hit rock bottom and he recognized himself as a pervert, he easily can understand that he needs to change, and he easily is going to start making this work of eliminating his psychological defects and awakening his consciousness. But the one who thinks that he's a very good person, having so much perversity hidden inside, will never change, because he is convinced that he doesn't need to change. So we need to start like identifying where we find ourselves from moment to moment, so we can discover who we really are. So we must learn to recognize every time that a psychological defect is taking us out from the present moment, taking us out from the here and now. Our psychological place should be at every time the same as our physical place. That is living the here and now. That is being in self-remembering. And every time that psychological defects manifest and take us to remember, take us to project, take us to think in this, in that, to feel this and that, is taking us out from the present moment, and is taking us to their dark places in the psychological country. So, through the self-observation, doing this practice from moment to moment, we can get to discover each of those places, each of those caverns in which our psychological defects take us, and we can start eliminating that and returning to the present moment, to the here and now. But for example, we are feeling lost. We must observe where psychologically is this loss taking me. I can observe all those like lascivious and places in my psychology where I'm projecting those porn scenarios, etc., where my anger at some point is taking me psychologically, and everything the same with every psychological defect. We must start like self-observing, discovering that, and for every psychological defect that we discover, we must appeal to the force of our Divine Mother and ask her to eliminate our psychological defects. I am feeling sadness. Okay, I'm going to discover the sadness in my emotion. It is making me feel like this, it is manifesting like this. Divine Mother, eliminate this, eliminate this, eliminate this, and I'm freeing myself. It's making me think, it's making me remembering what happened when that person did told me that and eliminate this. Divine Mother, eliminate this. I am worrying about what is going to happen tomorrow. I eliminate that. If I do so, I return to the here and now. The here and now is the place where happiness can actually happen. Here in the here and now is where we can find peace. And the only way in which we are going to stay in a peaceful state forever is when we learn to live in the present moment, in the here and now. We don't let our psychological defects to take us whenever they want. No, we have control over our body, we have control over our emotion, over our thoughts, over our sex, and we do so by practicing the psychological death, eliminating all of that. We are going to gain the control on each of those bodies. We are going to gain the ability to stay in the present moment, but at the same time, we are saving energy because we are not letting the psychological defects to all the time be there stealing our energy, but also every time that we ask for death to a psychological defect, we are liberating a small portion of our essence that is trapped there. That is the one that is giving life to that conditioning, to that defect, because our essence is immortal, but it's there like making a course, waiting for us to liberate it. And when we set that essence free, it comes to bring light to our interior. And well, something important when we are talking about the psychological country, and almost to go finishing this lecture, is to relate this on where we go when we die. Because this is actually much has been speculated over time about where we go when we die, and the answer to that question is closer and clearer than we think. Actually, when we die, we go to our psychological country, because when we die, it's exactly the same that happens when we go to sleep. Our soul leaves our physical body. Every time that we go to sleep, we put our body in the bed, and our soul goes there to our psychological country, and the vital body starts recharging this physical body, and our soul goes there and have all those experiences in that psychological country, and that is what we call a dream, right? And what happened that we are so asleep, we have our consciousness so asleep that we go there, we are driven by any of those psychological defects, we go there, we go to many places, and no matter how absurd the experience is, we don't realize that we find ourselves in a dream, right? That we are in the astral plane. We can actually get to see a three-headed dog, or we can see elephants flying, and we don't realize that we are not in the physical world. Likewise, the same thing is going to happen when our physical body dies. Our soul will also pass to that other dimension, with the difference that the silver cord, that is the cord that holds the physical body and the soul together, and that allows us to return to our body every time that we wake up, now it will be cut off by the angel of death. And we will stay there in our unconsciousness, repeating the same actions, projecting all the desires of our minds and all our emotions without having any control over those scenarios, and taken from one state to another by mechanical laws. And then after death, each one continues to live in the same psychological places as always. If a woman, for example, was all the time in her house making, food for her kids, washing the dishes and watching television, when she dies, she goes repeating the same thing. You see that, for example, you pass the whole day in your work, working there in the computer. You go to sleep, and you continue most of the time doing the same things. You, for example, go to sleep every night, and you have nightmares. Okay, when you die, you are going to those same places. You are going to live the same things, because that is the reason why we must awaken our consciousness. That is the reason why we must start freeing our essence, because that essence that we have inside of us, that is what we really are, is very beautiful. It actually came from above. It came from the stars, and unfortunately, it is now embedded within all these psychological eyes that we carry within us. And in opposition to all these psychological defects, our essence can retrace the path, can return to its original point, can return to the stars, but we must first free it from its bad companions, who from those guys who have our essence there, stuck in those suburbs of perdition. Sorry. So we have to do this work to release each portion of our consciousness that is trapped in our many psychological defects. And sorry, to achieve this, it is urgent that we make this, that we start like transferring our magnetic center, which currently is revolving around our false personality, to the essence. Since with this magnetic center established in all our illusory or all the illusory things of our personality, we will live in the most horrible places of our psychological country. Although in daily life we are magnificent citizens, internally we are something very different. And we must start by observing where is our magnetic center. Because according to what we do, to the things of our personality, there is our magnetic center. For example, if someone is, let's say a guy is a sailor, will have his center of gravity turning around his sales, his costumes, his customers, his business, his losses, whatever. If the guy is a musician, as I was saying before, all the things, or all of his magnetic center will turn around his concerts, his rehearsals, his bands. In the case of the housewife, all his magnetic center will be around her house, her cleaning, her kids, her husbands, etc. So that is like the first step, to find out what is our current center of gravity, what are we dedicating most of our time and energy to, and start transferring this center of gravity of the personality to the consciousness, taking time and energy from the things of the personality and dedicating it to the practices that will lead us to the awakening and to the development of our consciousness. That is like the most important thing. So we start advancing on this. So we start actually experiencing a transformation of our psychological country. And well, guys, this is today's lecture. And well, I will leave you with this quote. When the magnetic center is established in the consciousness, that is in the essence, there initiates the return of the man to the stars. Remember that our essence, our spirit came from above. So if we stop being this materialist, that this focused on the things of our personality, and we start working on ourselves and we start awakening our consciousness, we are going to start this path to returning back to the source. And well, those are the intentions of these lectures, to give you the tools, but also the encouragement to do this work, to start working on yourself and awakening your consciousness. And well, this was today's lecture. And I want to invite you to our next lecture that will be next Friday, where we will be talking about concentration and relaxation. In that lecture, we are going to learn how to relax and how to achieve concentration. We are going to see that concentration is like the greatest power because it allows us to be successful in everything we undertake. And we are going to see that most of the time we think that we know what is to be concentrated, but in that lecture we are going to see what really is to have concentration and how to achieve a constant concentration and the importance of being relaxed to stay in that concentration state. So don't miss that lecture. And I remind you that if at some point you have any question regarding these topics, the course, whatever, you can leave your questions in the comments of the video, or you can write me in the messenger of the page. So this is all for today. Thank you very much and have a good rest of the night. Bye bye.